panel members?
I'm sorry?
Was
that
he
better?
drafted? He was
Right there.
drafted panel members. I'll get on a panel.
So you heard the first panel. The second panel is going to tip a little bit. I want to keep it as simple as the first one. Scott, do you mind just introducing yourself?
Scott Hailey. I'm with Airespring. My role actually is, although I am a technologist to a point, my role really is to manage our TSD, or what was formerly known as master agent relationships. So I manage the top 5 TSDs in the country. So more strategy oriented, and then making sure that we have alignment between the TSD sales teams and solution engineers with our channel managers that are all across the country.
What is TSE?
Technology Services Distributor.
TSE.
Yeah, used to be Master Agent, which is no longer.
I got it.
Can't say that or Master Vendor anymore. It's their primary business.
There's an acronym game going on in every business. The communications business is in full flow of them.
That's right.
The Airespring is a company, national.
Yeah, so Airespring is pretty unique in the technology world. We're actually a family-owned and operated company. It started by 3 brothers in 2001. They own and operate the company daily. We operate in 190 countries for connectivity, SD-WAN, SASE, and managed security.
And has there been a lot of excitement, or excitement's maybe not the right term, but bringing on Starlink and having this as a wedge in your portfolio?
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is a wedge. We do every transport mode of connectivity that's available globally. Actually, operating 190 countries. With Starlink, we started actually because one of our customers, 140 locations in 22 countries, they had primary and backup connectivity with us, and they wanted to put Starlink as tertiary for 99 of their sites. We weren't an authorized reseller, and so they went out on their own and did it. And they came back to us about 3 months later and said, there is no kind of support, service delivery or technical support. Would you guys take this over and manage our account for management fee? And so we did that for about 18 months. And then finally, we had so many requests for Starlink that we became an authorized reseller last summer.
In the trusted advisor space, we call that saying uncle.
That's right. That's exactly right. So,
The,
it's actually a great service. It's just, if you like Microsoft support, it's about the same level of Microsoft support.
I was,
But,
you beat me to it.
yeah, the difference is for the customer, and it's really meant for a multi-location customer, if they want to manage that, is that it's our NOC dealing with them versus the customer having to pull it. I'm trying.
So Todd, your current company, it's Transwestern.
It's my main storefront. So yeah, I've done independent work since 2013, provider independent work, so subject matter expert, primarily in the data center facility realm. So really clients that I work with are end users, looking to deploy infrastructure in data center facilities, and supporting services. And more so, I'd say the majority of what I'm doing is related to investors and property owners and people looking to buy properties, and really the property landscape is a bit of a bonanza right now. And that's even skied much further now into the independent power producer and alternative to the grid solutions, bring your own power. So kind of an ever evolving and exciting landscape, if you will. But yeah, core to data center facilities. In Transwestern Technology Properties is the main storefront that I spend most of my time working through, and do work in the research side with Structure Research, who's a focused provider in the data center space, based out of Toronto.
You've been doing this for a while. You're a young-looking guy, but you're not a young guy.
No, that's yeah, I think that's probably true. The beard's getting grayer as the years go on, yeah. So,
And this is, we learned about you from our first panel, but do you mind just revisiting yourself?
Just quickly, yes, Navy veteran. Secure Saxon was the anchor point of where I started. Eventually grew into wireless ISPs, networking side. I used to have a Cisco console cable. I lost it. debating 20 years ago.
Yeah, ready?
But I'm more of an RF guy. And today, I offer the fractional virtual services in operations, strategy, CIO, and CISO.
So the everybody's going to have a different answer, which is fantastic. The rapid amount of change that's going on in technology is exponential to what's going on. From a network provider standpoint, you see customers procuring networks. They're a little different, but yet they're kind of the same.
Yeah, so of course, obviously, because everything's as a service now, so the network is core to everything. And so you've got to build resilient networks, right? So the first panel we talked about more on the security, protecting the network in that sense, but it's got to be resilient. So we're very big into primary backup, tertiary systems, SD-WAN, SASE, as components for cloud security. You've got to keep that network up because it's like losing electricity 25 years ago.
Absolutely.
Electricity goes down.
It's worse.
Yeah. Nowadays, so it's uptime, and so that's what we focus on is building resilient networks.
So, just real quickly, in the past 5 years, have you seen any dramatic changes beside the need for more resiliency? Because I don't think that's new. People have always wanted resiliency, but utility is a great not an acronym, but a correlation, because they're more dependent on this stuff than they've ever been.
Dependent on it. The other side is actually not the technology itself, but it's that, especially in the SMB space, is a lack of IT staff.
Okay.
Whether they're competent or if they are competent, they're like mercenaries. It's like whoever's willing to pay them the most, they move from place to place to place. So one of the things that, for example, we would offer is we've got heavily certified solution engineers and core engineers. And so we can augment a staff. So we're like a hybrid carrier. We're really a managed solutions provider, not an MSP in that sense. And so we're augmenting customers by managing their connectivity, their SD-WAN, their SASE, their voice. We're managing it for them.
Yep. So Todd, we had a great conversation recently. You may not have thought it was really great, but I thought it was great. And you know, what's happening in the media versus what is happening in reality, there are always two different things. What you hear in the media today is that America's lights are going to be turned off if we don't get nuclear power everywhere to run our data centers. That's in the media. But what's actually happening is very different from that, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it's interesting, kind of what I was alluding to. I want to give a shout out. You know, my foundation in the data center industry, Patrick was an office mate of mine.
Fantastic!
Like 2008 or 9 or something like that. So yeah, I mean, basically, what the themes that I kind of look at when I think about the data center industry and the networks, and just it's like what used to be still is, and just layers, and you know, everything just kind of dies hard. You know, so I still can walk into old data centers and you know, things that were Frankenstein at universities since the 60s. You know, and just you still sort of have legacy models that sustain. And so, you know, the big hype right now is AI, which is not new. It's just leaping at an exponentially forward in terms of what it's automating and what it's doing with machine learning and these big language models and all the cat videos, you know, that are impressive. You know,
That's great.
Things that are important, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, the way that I always look at it, and I'll kind of frame it this way, and then kind of pivot back to the energy. Is I remember I was sitting with my dad like 2010, and he said, you know, your business, all these facilities are going to be obsolete because, you know, we were sitting here having breakfast at this place, and he picks up this creamer and he says, what's going to happen when all the data that fits in this room can fit in this creamer? And I said, well, you're going to have creamer spilling into the parking lot, you know, because as compute and storage and network gets more efficient, people buy more because you can do more. So it unleashes these applications. So it's sort of like it doesn't work that way in other commodities. You only need so much milk and eggs longer. I mean, but data is we have it's insatiable. So on the energy side, that's where the rubber meets the road with this physical constraint. And so back when we were building facilities at Cyrus One, okay, if we could get 10, 20 megawatts off the grid, we're off to the races. That's not hard to get. Well, now you got projects that are getting out into the rural areas a little bit now that if you don't have 300 off the grid, it's a non-starter.
Are those high hope projects? Or
Some are just because there's a mania going on, and so everybody who's an energy pro or a real estate pro or a finance guy is trying to get into the data center business. So I'll just give you an example. We had a group talk to us about before the end of the year they want to control 15 gigawatts of land and power in Texas. That's 5 times Austin, okay, of what Austin draws right now. So that's we're gonna have to coach them.
High hope project.
We're gonna have to coach them a little bit about the economics of that, right? I mean, that would be like 70 billion probably if we were going to develop all that out. So, so as far as what you hear, what you see, it's going to keep going. It's going to keep growing. The power of the chips, these GPUs, just like we've seen with CPUs. The more powerful and the better they get, the more we're going to get. And I tell people, same I was telling my dad, like, why didn't virtualization wipe out data center facilities?
Good question.
20 years ago, should have, right? If the efficiencies, but no, like you just had stacks of blades and
virtualization did create $1 trillion industry.
And it did, yeah. So I mean, it's just. It was funny, you had the baseball kind of biomechanics. I don't know if you and I have talked about this, but I give anecdotal evidence of this. They're saying the Houston Astros have 6 people on their staff just for biomechanics. And one of them is my doctor's son. And so I'm like, well, if the Astros do that, everybody else has got to do it. And then the amount of data they're consuming and the payroll, and it's an arms race. It's all an arms race. So.
Okay, so let me ask Asus this as a follow-on, because Asus, in our time working together, Adam, here's the location, here's the data center, show me how we can connect. Power was never really a concern, was it, per se? Availability of power?
It may have been a concern for the data center provider, but for us, not necessarily.
As a network operator, not really.
No, because it was part of the SLA in terms of the consumption and availability of that service that we were getting, regardless of where it was in the world. And obviously, you took us to some strange places around the world, and we actually need cross-connect or something in that particular area of the world.
There always seemed to be a data center of some kind in those places. Todd knows the exotic ones and the non-exotic ones.
But you were with Rick. The Brazilian the Brazilian situation, that was fun.
Yeah, exactly.
That was like a hostage negotiation.
So I think you're right. There's 2 things that you guys have already talked about. I want to kind of drill down a little bit, or at least emphasize it. One of them is economies of scale today, because there's been a migration towards virtualization, towards data centers, and getting off of on-prem, maybe hybrid or going full cloud. Economies of scale is more attractive to be able to do something like that today. In terms of the power, if you look at some of the larger, the Googles and Apple, Facebook, etc., they're now buying land next to power plants, because that's the reliability that you can get baked into their services. If you think about where they're going to be in 5 years, it'll blow your mind in terms of what they're going to be offering, what they're going to be doing. So they're in the you were mentioning real estate, they're into that actively today to figure out where exactly they're going to build. And I think some of them are even considering, we were just talking about Brian and I, that they're going to consider building their own self-enclosed power plants. So, So anyway, just wanted to.
No, it's actually, it's a lot of, it's intriguing, and what you were talking about there is, we go back to 10, 12 years ago when I was first doing independent work and figuring out what I wanted to do, and it was I was getting on a lot of consulting calls with like private equity and hedge funds, and they were like, well, look, I mean, digital relay, Equinix, and all these, they're just all going to get wiped out by the cloud. And I said, listen, the reality is that, you know, the cloud companies can certainly have the financial wherewithal and know how to build their own facilities. I said, but these real estate structured data center companies, they will go out ahead of them, and you know, it becomes an ecosystem. So right now we see about a 60-40 split where, you know, about 40% of the hyperscalers are building, have their own campuses. So they may have an availability zone, you know, where they have 3 sites, and one of them is self-built, and 2 are with third-party providers, and it provides them a layer of safety of, hey, we're not just alone, you know, but we know how to do it, and then they kind of spread their bets.
So, Scott, Todd and I talked about a really interesting point, and I want to see where Airespring has seen in this, is that you can have multiple connections, multiple types, but the raw speeds are really increasing between the data centers. They've graduated from 1 gig to 10 gig, some of them are starting to tip 100 gig. The hyperscalers, what's interesting enough is that their bandwidth requirements are not actually skyrocketing because most of the work is being done on site at the server level. Do you see many customers wanting between their data centers to get higher capacity speeds or more links? Do you hear much about that?
No, not so much between the data centers, but in the world that we play in, we're just seeing, you know, bandwidth consumption growing. I mean, it just,
I would call that at the edge then.
Yes.
This is coming from it.
yeah, and that's really all it is for us. We're not connecting typically between data centers. We've done, you know, we'll get into some wave circuits, but not a whole lot. And we don't do dark fiber, so.
The wave circuit business is a good business because that's what the data centers are consuming.
Yes.
And as soon as I was going to ask you, back in the day, again, you didn't really, power was not a concern because wherever you were trying to get, people had already determined they needed to be there, so there was some facility being built, something to interconnect to. From a network standpoint, if you have somebody who's got hundreds of locations, you can log in, you can see what they're consuming, kind of what their temperature is, if you will. On data center side, Todd, it's about not just what the data center is capable of, but the equipment that they're putting in there, right? Sometimes it's high edge, sometimes it's not.
So Adam, if I can make a comment with you were asking Scott, is the interconnectivity between the data centers, I think they pretty much figured that out. Unless they come up with some terabit connectivity, which is going to come, but I don't think that's the bottleneck. I think it's internal to the data center and switch fabric that because of the conventional computing or GPUs that are being used, getting that within the data center, it could be a potential bottleneck. Now, I know some of the hardware manufacturers have done a good job of eliminating or minimizing that bottleneck within the data center.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the day, that's probably where at least where my concern would be is if I'm sensitive to latency in the business applications that I'm running, it's going to be inside of the data center, not necessarily between data centers.
Well, from the customer prem, I mean, if you're running layer 2, the other issue is, I'd say even with the biggest carriers in the world, it's portable.
Okay. If they have the capacity.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they're running into. A lot of times now, we see a number of orders coming in that require after-the-fact construction, but it's not always physical construction. It's the interior.
It's the network itself.
The plumbing. It's the plumbing of the carriers. When you're getting into ports and switches, when you start getting up into 100 gig plus, that's when you're.
It's interesting. I've not had a chance to look myself as to what kind of network NASA and them are running between the locations. But I can tell you most of what SpaceX is running themselves is on their own network. It's satellite service they're using, and they have been a miserly consumer of these larger pipes because they feel most of their work is being done at the data center, to your point, and they're investing billions of dollars putting it there.
And I think it's going to continue, not only for themselves, but whether you're in the public sector or private sector, or even as a service provider. What Starlink is doing, and I'm talking to some of the folks that are still in the satellite service provider industry, and even some of the operators on a global scale, they still haven't reacted to what Starlink is doing in terms of their erosion, what they've been able to penetrate with their models, being able to go to Costco and pick up an antenna, install it yourself. They're going to continue to disrupt the entire satellite service. Good on them. A couple of years ago, I was a little skeptical because of some of the operational concerns about satellites, the replacement of satellites, but the longevity of those, they're now extending them to as many as seven years. They weren't expecting that at first, but they're becoming more efficient. So their costs, the operational costs are going to come down, which is a big plus. And I think they're going to...
Are you speaking about SpaceX specifically, or just the...
No, SpaceX.
Okay.
Everyone else is just reacting slowly, not only to the pricing models, but technology-wise. Telesat, Canada, is getting ready to launch their Lightspeed network, comparable to SpaceX, but I don't think financially they're going to be able to compete. Think about it this way: if you look at the SpaceX network today, compared to a satellite operator like Intelsat or any of these other ones that are out there, their employee headcount is in the thousands. Starlink is at about 400. To run and operate, the launching, everything that's associated with getting that service online, they have 400 employees.
2 of them were in customer support.
That's great.
Yeah, so I think with the next, and maybe you would have visibility into this, Scott, is for Starlink, what other services are going to be embedding into it?
Sure.
Because you have to be providing some kind of value add, not just, hey, look, it's a pipe and I'm selling it. So if you're adding additional services, maybe they're leaving that to the distributors to do that versus what maybe they're envisioning.
You're seeing some, because they're bridging into carriers to do voice calls over cell phones in detrimental areas. So they're starting to do that, which means they're starting to act like a real global network company. And they will end up growing tremendously from that.
Yeah, I'd say like in the data center facility world, the one big thing that changed, and Equinix has always been, probably always going to be the big facility platform for networks, but they stood withheld for a long time until they connected their sites because they didn't want to feel like they were competing with their customers, which are about a third of their revenue is carriers. But they finally said, no, we own these facilities, we're going to buy from our customers and connect these out and develop that platform. But the most interesting one, I'm working on a project right now, and Jiminez is involved in. They went from a company that was just almost a pure real estate company back in the day, and they are now a full-fledged, all the way from hyperscale to retail co-location. And they're actually
REIT.
It's a real estate investment trust, but that could just be a pure play real estate company. They're a true service organization now, and they're essentially baking in SD-WAN platforms into their platform.
Yes.
And they're basically saying, oh, you want to connect Iron Mountain, you want to connect the data bank, and all these other competitors.
They brought in
superior provider neutral platform. That's very interesting.
They brought in networking experts that they did not have before.
They bought Telex. That was a big move.
Well, I'm talking about the network between all those facilities.
Yes.
They, past 10 years, they invested in that. Scott, I gotta ask you this. So with Airespring and Starlink, I know it's just on the start, but Sue's brought up a good point. As Starlink starts to add value-added services to their platform, like T-Mobile, have you seen what they're trying to do?
Yeah, I don't know with us, because for us it's purely transport, so unless they...
At this time?
Yeah, unless they provide a service in a wholesale manner, obviously, that we can resell, that'd be the only thing that with us.
But it's still to you just a transport method.
It's a transport. I mean,
Okay.
the value add for customers are, I've already mentioned,
Yeah.
lack of service delivery and customer support, so that's something we can provide. The other aspect though for our large customer, multi-site customers are, we maintain a huge inventory. So we can provide an OpEx model instead of a CapEx to a customer.
Absolutely.
They can buy it if they want to, but if they don't want to, we'll own it and rent it. And the nice thing about that is with us, if the box goes down or the antenna goes down, we ship out a new one next day. If they're a Starlink customer, it's a minimum of 30 days before.
There's nothing wrong with saying what the truth is, in that it's a wholesale platform. It's designed for distribution.
Yes,
Because distribution is the only one who can support it.
that's right.
Okay. Todd, I was going to ask you just the last question that we came up with, which was, is it deep sake? Is that what it's called?
Deep seat?
Deep seat.
Yeah.
Okay, so data centers require a lot of power because people perceive that all those computers that are going to go into them are going to chew up all that power. But somebody in China innovates off of something we've already developed that requires substantially less, if not any power at all. It's incredible, isn't it?
That's what they say, so we'll see. I mean, I tend to trust,
At a high level.
yeah, true, but I mean, I tend to trust and follow money. And so I don't think Google and Amazon and Microsoft and Oracle are gonna just throw billions and billions out there against something they can, we could go run down to the local bank and get money for it.
So if you did feel that the new initiative to spend $500 billion building out our own platform was a bust, you feel comfortable saying it?
Well, what I would say is this, I don't, kind of like what I was saying before, like, I don't see a world where you are not going to need substantially more capacity
Okay.
because of, again, the efficiencies. Well, we've only seen the data center industry grow, even during recessions. Obviously we rode through the dot-com bust, so, I think we're gonna have an AI bust because there's a lot of money coming into that. But I trust the smart money, let's put it that way.
Mhm.
And they're probably, look, when there's a bust, they're gonna get hurt. We may see, the hyperscaler stocks go down 20-30%, but, they're,
From a tactical
from which point,
From a tactical level, I'll tell you what I learned in the baseline of the data center business is that there's power that's available, and that there's power that the equipment the customer's putting in there that has ratings on it. The
Yeah.
power has, the equipment is either
Like-
rated to run X percent. The data center operators always want some overhead for the equipment being operated at 100% capacity.
Yeah.
Which usually isn't.
Well, it depends on the application, right? So if you're talking about, the corporate, your corporate IT people, and I still deal with this all the time.
Yeah.
They're gonna screw it up almost every time. They're gonna go to the colo company and they're gonna order way too much power. And they're
Which is expensive.
They're just gonna screw it. But that's what it's driven on. It's driven off of your power capacity that you're ordering. So usually the number one thing I help companies with is right size that scope, order it right, make sure you got it right for more power. But back in the Cyrus days, man, I was managing that P&L, and we had an EBITDA that was off the chart because
The definition
to pay that.
The definition of right means that it's the customer is paying for power almost as much as they need, but not too much more.
Right, yeah, I mean, so, if, I would want my client to not run less than 80% of what we've bought. 20% is kind of good, but
Are those kind of metrics, are they still relevant?
they're relevant on the enterprise side. So the enterprise side, when you talk about hybrid IT in these facilities, it's still growing actually, but at a single digit rate. And a lot of that's going to public cloud, and you see public cloud now growing and maybe in the teens, okay? But this AI is growing astronomically, and it's going to take more capacity. Now, when you're talking about, geophysical, or you're talking about high performance applications, they know what they're doing. It's too important for that not to screw
This
up.
is critical.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm if I'm a $50 billion company and I waste $1 million on power I didn't need, that's not a big deal. But if I'm a geophysical company and I waste $10 million on power I don't need, that's my core product, I can't afford that. So it's sort of a different use case, different clients.
Jesus, in your time, have you seen companies internally, because where these applications are hosted is political choice often, but have you seen companies battling out whether we should keep it in front of us, put it off site, put it completely off site, like in another country potentially?
Short answer is yes, and most of that stems from legacy employees.
Okay.
This is kind of the way we've always done it. We've always had a closet and I don't want to lose my job type of mentality.
Even for large companies, believe it or not.
Yeah, well, yeah.
There's still server hugging that dies hard, like I said.
Yeah.
But I want to tell you something crazy though. So I had a client of mine talk about their on-premise data center, and that to me means that's in my building. It's always been that. They meant their co-location site, and they meant that because they own the infrastructure. And so when I started hearing people say on-premise and co-location, I'm like, okay, it's mainstream. So the server hugging days are pretty well past, but they're still there.
They're still there. Oh, absolutely. Especially in the SMB side. You'll see a lot of, we've got a little closet over here.
I'll follow this question on. So with those things being what they are, the attack surface, the cyber attack surface, do you see bleeding from those? Hey, I'm holding on to it, it's been a while. I haven't really modernized, so I'm even more at risk per se. Have you seen much of that?
And to me, it's the network, right? I mean, so it's on the network side more than it is the physical security. Everybody, you could have a physical security problem, but the ninjas coming through the perimeter, if they don't need to, they can come through your network, right? So,
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, they're more vulnerable when it comes to cyber attacks by legacy hardware being on-prem. And even if they did a tech refresh 2 years ago, it's still in their closet, they're not as robust as it's going to be in other environments.
Some of the other points that were made earlier are so relevant because even large companies, I'm talking 1,000, 2,000 employees that have infrastructure that may be 3, 5, 7 years old, but they've never had a bad day, they've never had the whole thing brought down. Potentially their data is just not worth going after, per se. Have you seen much of that happening?
No, I have not.
You've not?
I've seen where smaller organizations it's out of sight, out of mind. It seems to be running. We don't have anything proprietary, etc. And it feels comfortable. Yeah, exactly. Until, as I try to prepare them, your DR plan. Well, we'll work on that. No, let's invest some time and resources into getting that done and express to them the value behind doing that, because that's what they're asking me to do. They don't think that way, so I have to do it for them.
So I was talking with Scott before this about what we were going to discuss, what we were going to present. One of the things that he talked about in his short slide deck to me was the escalation process at Airespring. You gentlemen may not have any exposure to this, but I've always loved an escalation list. I've always really loved them. The providers that do not have escalation lists, they should be avoided at all costs, because anybody who's willing to put that list down is willing to be accountable, even at the highest level, regardless of what the circumstances are. Who caused what, why it happened, those kind of things. But it is still cultural for people to click on things they shouldn't. If they feel like they're challenged, to try and, I have a client a large client, they got an email saying if you don't pay us, we're going to lock you out of all your data. This was to a mid-level person. That person was pretty arrogant. They attacked the person who was asking the ransomware. They were saying, hey, bleep off, leave me alone. And the guy came back, the person came back and said, I'm serious. I'm going to zap your network if you don't pay us. This is a global operating company, beautiful private network, great security and firewalls up. But this one person decided to antagonize a ransomware person. James, I'm not sure if you've ever heard of this, have you? Where somebody gets a ransomware, the IT person says, you know, take your best shot, go ahead. I don't care, I'm not gonna pay the ransom. Do whatever you think you're gonna do. I'm impervious.
I've heard of it.
Okay. So this person did that, and again, they had a pretty nice, what you would call it, classical network setup. They got locked down, and there were 40 terabits of design data. This is a major construction manufacturing company. They had 40 terabits of production design data zapped. Those two guys, one guy who clicked on it, his supervisor got walked out that afternoon. And here was the response to that event. James, I gotta tell you, the emergency response to the emergency of the ransomware coming on was to turn on log monitoring. Okay?
Turn on what?
Log monitoring
Okay.
after the event. After. You know a lot about logs. This is
Too late. They come to the bourbon then.
What's that?
You knew about logs, the guy with the bourbon?
Yeah. So culture, like, I don't know if you have seen this, but culture is, hey, something's happened. I think I can fix it because I'm this person who is supposed to be able to fix it. But they are just nowhere near the right person that needs to be that. James, let me ask you, so what would you say needs to be done when you're sitting there as an IT person? You get an email that says, I've got you, pay me or I'm gonna do it. What would you say the first thing for them to do would be?
First, well, I mean, honestly, unplug your network. I mean, if I was a small business, I would unplug my network right away.
Okay.
And I'd call in my insurance company, I would get some response company.
Okay. You wouldn't choose to antagonize the person attacking you.
No, I mean, you're playing with people that are really good at this. I mean, really, really good at it.
Okay, so hang on.
Usually antagonizing these guys is not the, I mean, we saw that happen with Sony, where Sony, the president of Sony antagonized a hacker online and they doxed him as kids.
I have a separate Sony.
And that was a really bad situation because he ended up having to sort of issue a public apology. Mea culpa didn't mean to call you out in an open chat. I mean, some of these guys are it's their pride is their hacking, and I just wouldn't call them out.
Okay, so I appreciate that. My first thought for them to do when they see this is to check the last time they did a full backup.
Well,
Before they start to antagonize the person, is at least check where they are.
most of the time people know the ransomware. I mean, so here's the thing, right? So it's ransomware versus a data breach, two separate instances. Small businesses are more likely now to suffer a big data breach if the data they find has some value to the they think there's value to it. If it's ransomware, you're going to typically find it when you come in, everything's blue screen. I mean, you're at that point. There's a thing saying call me and you can get your data back. If somebody called me and said they had a data breach, then I'm at that point. Yeah, I'm probably looking for my backups, but I may look to do a little bit more of an investigation of did somebody log in? I might be digging. So it really does depend on what of the two events that I'm looking at and how I'm going to respond. If it's ransomware, I'm looking at my system and it looks like it's up. I'm going to probably turn everything off to make sure they haven't activated something at that point.
Okay, so Todd, let me ask you, in your experience, the top two reasons why somebody needs to get into a data center after hours, legitimate reasons, do you mind telling me what you think they are? Or what they typically are?
Not very common, man, but I would say, you should be able to make a phone call.
Equipment failure, that's probably one.
A proper site should have 24/7 hands, but if something crapped out, you gotta go deal with it in the middle of the night. Bad deal, but yeah.
So what I've learned in my experience is that it's either an equipment failure or a legal hold. Somebody is being sued for something and they want to make sure that they've got a point in time forward that they're tracking. I've seen many people wanting to get into data centers 2, 3 o'clock in the morning because they've been told internally that the lawsuit is going. Have you heard much about that or no? Okay. Where I'm going is that there's a real small 1 or 2, 3 reasons why you need to get into a facility after
Yeah,
hours.
most of these are lights out.
Legitimate.
You always go into like major data centers and the amount of people that are so small, and even on a lot of the development and stuff we're looking at, it's like, well, your parking ratio is so small compared to say an office building, because I mean, you know, normally the times that we're gonna see people going to the data center is on their install, and then, you know, you can ship minor stuff and just have the site handle it at that.
So have you seen any of that? As far as,
Physically being there or the legal side?
well, so the scenario is your company's sitting at it and you get a ransomware. What do? Do you be belligerent to the person that's attacking to you, or do you take a look and say, hey, let me see where we are?
Well, I think it's kind of binary. Either you have a DR plan or you don't.
Okay.
If you don't have a DR plan, it's chaos. You may not even be aware, you may contact the wrong person, you may not contact enough people. But if you have a DR plan, it's going to dictate amongst the chaos exactly what you should be doing.
Okay.
It's that simple.
I'll tell you on where I've seen like banking at this point, some banking clients, and they don't even mess with DR much anymore. It's active. I mean, they're like
They want to work it all the time.
3 milliseconds, you know, Austin to Dallas, you know, and you can get this to work, and you know, they got sealed up black boxes in there in the data centers, and it's kind of gotten into a rhythm that I see in certain sectors, right? I mean, you know, so and then of course that's all, you know, they got it all hybrided out in the cloud, and they may have some of their own data centers.
They believe in the tech, so they invest in it.
Yeah, and it's really like these are clones of each other that essentially speak to each other, and so they're not having to. I mean, they're skipping that whole thing. Because to your point, I mean that could be overkill for a lot of apps. But you're just wasting your money if you've got a bunch of standby infrastructure and you haven't really tested it out. So that's probably pretty common more on the small business side.
Absolutely.
It's just,
You're right.
They're just
So,
negligent.
so the big closing question here, and I really appreciate you guys coming. As far as the difference from the customer side, whoever that customer may be, the difference between investing versus the opposite of investing, which, James, the opposite of investing in security is being fined for lack of it, right?
Well, it's tech debt. Eventually it catches up.
Yeah.
But that's the opposite, right? Is being fined for non-compliant versus investing and being current. You can kind of answer individually.
Yeah, I mean, that would not fall much in our space. I would go back to the original panel, especially in the SMB market. Probably security design and the willingness to actually take it on and invest in it has now been driven by the insurance companies. That's where, because they want the insurance, so they say, okay, I wouldn't have normally done this on my own, but because I've got to do this, to have this policy, I'm more likely to actually take the time and invest.
Well, that's what ends up happening is the tech debt cycle catches them on a compliance audit or on an insurance audit. When they go back to renew insurance, that's when they end up having to go, got a bunch of things we have to do.
Yeah.
Or when they go for a compliance audit, they find out they're really far behind. And if they sign a 3 or 4 year contract on insurance, they're good now, and then they're doing kind of jerky security. Oh gosh, now we have to jump forward and just to get the insurance. A lot of them finding out they're not getting covered because they just don't have the minimum balls out for insurance.
So as a salesperson, I want to know that data. I want to know when that renewal is coming up. And that's when a trusted advisor can come in. You can get that data.
Yeah.
Because you know that's the time that they've got to shore up.
What he's saying is, and what I've learned is that it's becoming, I mean, the insurance companies are tightening the noose from annual to quarterly. I'm not sure, I think I talked to James earlier about the next big service providers out there, I think will be insurance companies. Why wouldn't they become a provider?
Well, I'll add one thing in the context of that on the property side is the term in real estate is deferred maintenance, right? So that's essentially when you know your roof's supposed to be replaced, but you're just going to see if you can live over another year or two. What I would always recommend to people in the facility world, if you're going to be co-locating, say a data center somewhere, is who's actually at that site. Are there major companies that are at that site that are going to be so up on that provider, right, that you're shielded, from that. The compliance has to be up to snuff. I mean, all that, it's like your safety in numbers, and you don't necessarily want to be the tiny fish, but if you're kind of a mid-sized fish and there's some whales in there, you're in a safe spot. That's usually what I see. Versus, you try to save a few bucks and you're the big fish in kind of a second-rate data center. Man, you don't know what could happen. So
I'm going to leave this with a great story about how to breach data center security, because James, you're going to love this. Many people say that you can't get into a data center, and many of the data centers have fences around their properties, so you really can't physically get in. Sometimes on those fences outside, they don't have punch boxes for you to get into. So how in the world is it possible to get into a secure facility and bypass all that? It's almost
I know people can do it.
it's almost unbelievable. So
That's why you do physical security testing now. They should. Data centers should. Because some are good and some are bad. It depends on the person who's there for the day.
it was about maybe 10 years ago now. Todd and I were working on a global project for RigNet. Their primary data center in London was a Verizon data center that was secured. There was no way to get in from the outside. I had scheduled a 4 o'clock appointment to meet people at the data center, and we got there, and we're like, how the hell do we get into this place? So, unbeknownst to me, 4 o'clock was a good time because everybody in England takes tea. So Todd and I are like, hey, wait here. We're walking around the data center with all the cameras and stuff. Go figure, there's some guy from Verizon who's got his tea. I'm not sure if you remember that. He's just sitting outside. And we're like, hey, we work there, we want to get in. And he's like, oh, what's up? We have an appointment, this and that. Got right in.
well, it's the people issues. And a lot of times it's the clients.
Was that social engineering?
Well, yeah. When I took over for the customer operations, all of that. One of the things we did was we audited, we were having an issue with a client that couldn't keep their own stuff straight and blaming us. And so I was like, latched down on that, and I found a case where one dude had access to 3 client cages. And that wasn't on us necessarily. It was because this guy has moved on, and 2 companies didn't cut his access off.
This is, you're talking about the integrity of the access control list,
Yeah.
right, at the data center?
Yeah, but look, so we started getting more proactive, but that's not really our obligation, right? I mean, you can point fingers, but this is the companies not cutting their access on. We don't know if it still works there. So, yeah, just, I think it's people. People are the problem. You can check it up. Hey, you can check it up all you want and put all the barriers you want, but if the people, so we'll see if AI gives us robots that, get it right.
Well, I've asked a lot of questions. Scott, do you want to say anything in closing as far as Airespring's dominance in the pending Starlink market, SpaceX market?
No, it's it's a burgeoning market. It is, I will say this, despite their lack of customer support, Starlink really works well.
The platform.
It really works. It's so funny. We have quite a few clients that were running DI circuits and the Starlink circuit through an SD-WAN box. And you would think the DI circuit would run almost all the traffic. 30-40% of the time it's going to the Starlink node.
Interesting.
Because it's so good. The latency is so, it's amazing. When it works fantastic.
That's great.
So,
That's why they're doing so well.
yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, for you guys, it's cool that, hey, if you need that high touch, then that's your you don't want them to get too high touch. That's
No,
you.
we're value add.
That's value add.
We're value add. when it comes to installing.
It's a mess to fix this shit. If no one's gonna respond, it won't get fixed quick, you know? Jesus, do you have anything in closing that you can comment on?
No, I think everything has been said. Thanks for the opportunity.
Really appreciate you guys coming out,
Yeah, right on. Thank you.
and thank you guys.
Thank you, sir. Good job, Todd.
Yeah.
Always, thank you.
Very good.
Nice to meet you.
You bet, Mike.
Scott.
Thank you.
Pleasure.